The house at the end of Willow Lane had always been shrouded in mystery. To the neighbors, it was simply an old, abandoned residence that had seen better days. To newlyweds Laura and James Mitchell, it was a dream come true. The large Victorian house, with its intricate woodwork and spacious rooms, promised a new beginning. "Can you believe it?" Laura said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Our very own house." James smiled, squeezing her hand. "It's perfect." As they moved in, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air seemed thick with anticipation, as if the house itself was waiting for something. Dismissing it as first-time homeowner jitters, they began to settle in. The first few days were blissful. They unpacked, decorated, and made the house their own. But then, strange things began to happen. It started with small, inexplicable events. Lights flickering on and off, doors creaking open on their own, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. Laura brushed it off as old house quirks, but James wasn't so sure. "Maybe we should get this place checked out," James suggested one night as they lay in bed. Laura laughed softly. "It's just an old house, James. It's bound to have a few creaks and groans." But James couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. One evening, while James was working late, Laura decided to explore the attic. She had always been curious about what treasures might be hidden up there. As she climbed the narrow staircase, she felt a chill run down her spine. The attic was dimly lit, filled with old furniture covered in dust and cobwebs. In the corner, she noticed an old trunk. Curious, she opened it and found a collection of old photographs and letters. As she sifted through them, one photograph caught her eye. It was a picture of a woman who looked eerily similar to her, standing in front of the house. Laura felt a wave of unease wash over her. Who was this woman? And why did she look so much like her? That night, Laura had a vivid dream. She was in the house, but it was different. The walls were covered in blood, and she could hear a woman screaming. She woke up in a cold sweat, the echoes of the screams still ringing in her ears. "Are you okay?" James asked, concerned. Laura nodded, trying to shake off the lingering fear. "Just a bad dream." But the dreams continued, each one more terrifying than the last. The woman in the photograph haunted her dreams, whispering warnings that Laura couldn't understand. James began to notice changes in Laura. She became withdrawn, jumpy, and obsessed with the woman in the photograph. She spent hours researching the history of the house, trying to uncover the identity of the woman. One night, Laura found an old journal hidden in the attic. It belonged to the woman in the photograph, whose name was Isabella. As she read, she discovered a horrifying tale. Isabella had lived in the house over a century ago. She had been married to a man named Victor, who became increasingly abusive and controlling. In a fit of rage, Victor had murdered Isabella and buried her body in the basement. Her spirit, unable to move on, remained trapped in the house, seeking justice and revenge. Laura felt a chill run down her spine as she read the final entry. Isabella's last words were a plea for help, a desperate cry for someone to uncover the truth and set her free. Determined to help Isabella, Laura convinced James to help her search the basement. Reluctantly, he agreed. As they descended into the dark, damp basement, the air grew colder. Laura's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the corner, they found a loose floorboard. With trembling hands, they pried it up, revealing a shallow grave. Laura gasped as she uncovered Isabella's skeletal remains. The air grew colder, and a sense of dread filled the room. Suddenly, they heard a loud crash upstairs. "James, we need to get out of here," Laura whispered, her voice trembling. But it was too late. The door to the basement slammed shut, trapping them inside. The temperature plummeted, and they could see their breath in the cold air. The flashlight flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. They heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, descending the stairs. A cold, sinister voice filled the air. "You shouldn't have come here," it hissed. Laura clung to James, her heart pounding in her chest. "Who are you? What do you want?" The voice laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the basement. "I am Victor, and this house is mine. You will join Isabella in death." Laura and James felt a cold hand wrap around their throats, squeezing the life out of them. Desperate, Laura remembered Isabella's plea for justice. "Isabella!" Laura cried out. "We found you. We know what happened." The grip on their throats loosened, and the temperature in the room began to rise. A soft, ethereal light filled the basement, and Isabella's spirit appeared before them. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. Victor's spirit screamed in rage as Isabella's light grew brighter, banishing him from the house. The basement door creaked open, and Laura and James stumbled out, gasping for breath. The next morning, they called the authorities, and Isabella's remains were properly buried. The house felt lighter, free from the malevolent presence that had haunted it for so long. Laura and James decided to sell the house and start anew. As they drove away, they couldn't help but glance back one last time. The house stood silently, its secrets finally laid to rest. But as they rounded the corner, Laura thought she saw a figure standing in the window. A woman with a sad smile, watching them leave. "Thank you," Laura whispered, knowing that Isabella was finally at peace. And as they drove into the future, they carried with them the memory of the house on Willow Lane, and the spirit who had finally found rest.